Hey guys, Miss Bellis here. So today we're going to be looking at the respiratory system of our organ systems unit. So, what is the function of the respiratory system? Obviously, when we breathe in, we're getting oxygen in, and when we breathe out, we're getting carbon dioxide out, right? Um, Now that is happening between the atmosphere. It's also then combining with the circulatory system and doing so at our blood, right? Because that's how we're getting carbon dioxide off of our cells is through the blood. And then that goes to the lungs and we get it out of our bodies in general. So, with that gas exchange, there's three different parts to it. There is breathing. Where's my mouse? There's breathing. We're moving it around our bodies and then actually getting it to our cells. So bringing it in from the atmosphere, transporting it along the circulatory system in your arteries and veins, and then actually doing that gas exchange at the capillaries, at the tissues and cells of your body. So, internal respiration is that last part we were just talking about where the oxygen goes onto the cells, and when the carbon dioxide comes off of your cells and goes onto the blood cells and then is going to head away. That's internal respiration where it's happening at your tissues, right? What your blood is doing at all of the tissues in your body. External respiration is oh, there you go. You're responding with your external environment, right? So what's happening between the atmosphere and your blood, what you're actually doing, the parts that we can actually control of the respiratory system, the parts that you can hear right now, that's external respiration. So when we're looking in here, we got the trachea, we got our bronchi. Then they branch into smaller ones called bronchioles, and then at the very end we have these grape-like sacs. You see how those kind of like look like the grapes that they dangle over the person that they're fanning with the palms with. Or if you just seen a bundle of grapes, I guess you didn't need all that other information. Those are your alveoli at the end, and that's where the gas exchange actually occurs. The capillaries are going to be wrapped around each of those, and diffusion will occur at that area. So, for the pathway of air, when you breathe in, you can either breathe in through your nose or your mouth. And remember that your nose actually provides a filter so that if there's like pollen or bad things in the air, it gets trapped in your nose hairs. Also, all of those you have a bunch of capillaries within your nose that as air goes over it, it warms that air. It also moistens that air. Versus if you just breathe through your mouth all of the time, you don't get that extra security of the air being warmer and more moist when it gets down into your lungs. Then we get to the pharynx, which is the back of your throat. This goes behind the nose, it goes behind the mouth, and just below the mouth. That is all pharynx, which is why when you are like drinking something and you laugh and it goes into your nose, it's because it's all connected. Or if you've seen that nasty stuff where people take spaghetti through their nose and their throat and they're like flossing, blah. Not the dancing flossing, you know what I'm saying. Then it goes down to the trachea. Right above that will be the epiglottis, which will prevent food from going into your trachea, right? We'll talk more about that when we get there. Then the trachea splits at the bottom into the main bronchi, singular, bronchus. And then as those branch into smaller and smaller bits, those are called bronchioles. Adding eol at the end of a word means little, so little bronchus. And then at the very bottom, the alveoli, singular, alveolus. Those are the little grape-like air sacs at the bottom. So you can pause this and quiz yourself over those different structures. Right there at the back, so here's the tongue. At the back of that is your epiglottis. So looking at the alveoli, again, grape-like structures. Notice all this netting around it. Those are the capillaries. Notice how they're red and blue. The red side being oxygenated blood, the blue side being deoxygenated blood. So when it's coming from the lungs, the interesting part here is that it's the arteries here that are blue and the veins here that are red, because in the lungs is where we're putting oxygen onto it. Remember, arteries carry blood away from the heart and veins carry blood back to the heart. So in this case, the blood that comes to this area is deoxygenated. And so that would be represented with the blue blood vessels, saying that they are deoxygenated. So with that gas exchange, we have our red blood cells, which are going to have the molecule hemoglobin that actually allows for reacting with oxygen to carry that around the body. And remember, with diffusion, things move from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. So if we have a blood cell moving around with a bunch of oxygen on it, when it gets to a cell that has used up its oxygen, it's going to diffuse off of the red blood cell and into that other cell due to diffusion. There was a bunch on this blood cell, there's not in this area, woo, it moves that way. Same thing with the carbon dioxide. That cell, those tissues that have been using the, doing their work, they use up the oxygen that they have and they produce carbon dioxide. And so then there's a bunch of carbon dioxide on them and not on the blood cells that are floating around your arteries and into your capillaries. And so then the carbon dioxide is going to move down its concentration gradient, right, through process of diffusion onto the red blood cell. And so hemoglobin is the molecule that'll be all over the red blood cells. It reacts with the oxygen to hold it onto the blood cell. This is what I was just saying with the concentrations. So you can pause that and read that, but it's what I was just saying. So then, mechanisms of breathing. Inspiration. Expiration. We're not talking about inspire like make people feel good, or expire like the date on your food when it's too old. Talking about inspiration, breathe in, expiration, breathe out. So when you breathe in, your diaphragm actually moves downward and your lungs are pressed right up against that. And so when that happens, it actually opens up the lungs, allowing for more volume in there. Your rib cage, imagine this being like a dramatic version of your ribs to your sternum here, meeting here. When you breathe in, your ribs lift up. You can feel it when you actually hold on, like breathe in. You feel the rib cage move upward. Okay, it opens up. And so that opening up and then the pulling down at the bottom causes a huge increase of volume in the lungs. And then when you expire, you breathe out, you undo that. The diaphragm relaxes, it moves back up into its umbrella position, and then your rib cage contracts back down. And so all of that decreases the volume, and so then air moves outward. We won't get much into the changes in atmospheric pressure, but it does have to do with, let me double check. Okay, it does have to do with the pressure inside your lungs compared to the pressure outside in the environment that automatically causes your lungs to inflate and deflate, and you don't have to think about it. So looking in this picture, when you breathe in, the diaphragm moves down. When you breathe out, the diaphragm moves back up. When you breathe in, your chest expands. When you breathe out, it reduces, goes back out. So what controls this? It is your brain stem. Everything to do with keeping you alive has to do with your brain stem. This is part of why in other animals, like in a whale or a gorilla, I'm just name off any animal that is bigger than us. When we say that humans have bigger brains than anything else, we're not saying that we physically have a bigger brain, because any animal that's bigger than a human has a physically larger brain, but we have a larger forebrain compared to the size of our brain stem. Other animals have a huge brain stem, and this other stuff is much smaller. And that just has to do with our higher order of processed thinking that we can do. So as you're doing activity, you end up having more carbon dioxide around your body, and that sends off signals in the brain that then say, hey, we need to breathe more and bring more oxygen into the body. So it's always a matter of increased carbon dioxide is what tells your body to breathe in more oxygen. So looking here, you can see it how, if you recall that term for if your body needs more and so it increases it until it doesn't need more and so it decreases it. If you can recall what that process is, homeostasis. What we've got going on here is exercise. And so when that happens, there's an increase of carbon dioxide in the body. And there are going to be little receptors that send information to the brain saying, hey, we're doing a lot of activity, we need more oxygen, or we're gonna need more oxygen soon. And so the heart beats faster. And then it continues to respond. Do we have more or less carbon dioxide going in? So the heart's beating faster to move more blood around. And then the lungs, you start breathing in and out more frequently to then also be working with that process of your heart beating faster. Because if we're moving the blood more, then we need more oxygen to come on to get onto those blood cells. So then we've got some respiratory problems. Bronchitis, itis at the end of a word means inflammation, so swelling up of. So bronchitis is just that you have your main passageways are swollen up. Asthma is when there's inflammation in the airways that is triggered by something. It's not just like a constant state of it. So whether it's pollen, dust, there is asthma that people get when they exercise, like they don't have this trouble breathing until they exercise. There actually used to be a teacher at our school that had that, and I always thought that was interesting. Because, you know, sometimes you like think that people are just making stuff up because they don't want to do exercise, but it's a real thing. And then respiratory distress syndrome. This has to do with babies, prematurely born babies. Those alveolar sacs, have you ever blown up a balloon before? The first time you blow it up is the most difficult, right? And then after that point, every time you open it up, you try to blow it up, it's a lot easier. Like the stretchiness and everything, it's just easier to blow it up after that point. There is this fluid in your alveolar sacs that helps make sure that those always stay open. Before you're born, those sacs are shut because we're not doing any breathing with our lungs when we're inside of mom. And so that first breath you ever take when you are born is the most difficult breath you will take your whole life. And in premature babies, those surfaces tend to get more stuck together because their bodies haven't started making surfactant, that fluid within there, and simply because the lungs are the last thing to develop because we need them the least until we get out of the body, outside of mom's body. And so respiratory distress syndrome is when they don't have enough of that surfactant, that fluid being formed in their lungs, fluid that's supposed to be there, and so they get stuck together. Makes breathing very difficult. And that's where we're going to leave with the respiratory system. So I'll see you next time.